Welcome to Gaming Instincts. Today I'll be reviewing FBC Firebreak, a brand new co-op FPS from the creators of Control, Alan Wake, and the iconic Max Payne series. Fun fact, FBC Firebreak is Remedy's first attempt at multiplayer, marking a notable side venture for a studio best known for its single-player action-packed experiences. The big question is, did Remedy manage to hit a home run by applying their single-player development expertise to a co-op experience, or should they stick to what they know best? The short answer is that FBC Firebreak turned out to be a fantastic sleeping medication rather than a fun and addicting co-op experience with your buddies. But let's dive into the full review and understand why that is. Quick disclaimer, thanks to Remedy and their PR agency for providing an early review copy of FBC Firebreak for the PC. For the purposes of this video, I'm here to answer all of your burning questions in this full in-depth review. Be sure to stick around for the entire video to catch my final score, rated on a 10-point scale. Here at Gaming Instincts, our reviews are always honest and unbiased, and we break them down into storyline, gameplay, graphics, and art style, audio performance, and of course, a final conclusion with a final verdict. If you are looking for the latest video game reviews and the hottest trending gaming industry news, make sure to visit our website over at gaminginstincts.com and subscribe to this YouTube channel with notifications turned on. Without further ado, let's begin. First, let's quickly cover the setting before diving into the gameplay. FBC Firebreak takes place 6 years after the events of Control, Remedy's most recent single-player action-heavy franchise. However, unlike Control's darker, more serious and occasionally horror-tinged tone, Firebreak leans into a more humorous and light-hearted vibe. You play as a member of the Federal Bureau of Control's Firebreak containment teams, tasked with venturing into the ever-shifting oldest house to eliminate the extra-dimensional threat known as the Hiss. As you play, there's no real narrative driving the experience, just a basic excuse to justify why you're out there fighting off the Hiss. This is not necessarily a bad thing, but for those who are hoping for something more when it comes to the lore of Control, then you might be a bit disappointed that it's not that deep. In my personal opinion, I kind of wish the game did not take place in that universe, and mind you, I thought Control was a fantastic game, and I cannot wait for the inevitable sequel, but I would have rather had them make a co-op game in a completely new universe instead. With the story and premise out of the way, let's dive into the gameplay, and let me tell you, FBC Firebreak might just be the fastest route to putting you to sleep. As you already know, FBC Firebreak is a multiplayer co-op first-person shooter with a very straightforward structure. It's designed for 3-player squads, and your team can choose from 5 different jobs: hotfix, paper chase, ground control, frequency shift, and freezer duty. These jobs essentially act as mission types, so Remedy also plans to add 2 more post-launch jobs later this year, free of charge, which is a nice touch. Like most multiplayer games, FBC Firebreak features an account-wide leveling system that progresses regardless of which class or character you choose. In addition to this, the game includes 3 distinct kits: Fixer, Jump, and Splash. Each kit can be leveled up individually up to level 9 by playing with that specific kit. As you level them up, you unlock additional perk slots for that kit. Meanwhile, increasing your overall account level unlocks new perks that can be equipped across all the kits. Now let's break down on how each of the jobs work and what's required to complete them. Before selecting a job, you can customize a few settings, including the session length, which is equal to the clearance, and difficulty. Each job consists of up to 3 clearance levels, with each level representing a separate zone. Clearance level 1 typically lasts about 4 to 6 minutes, depending on the job type. Level 2 introduces a second zone with tougher enemies, while level 3 adds a final, more challenging zone featuring a unique objective not seen in the previous 2. Naturally, each level increases the difficulty and extends the overall session length. You may also adjust the threat level, which is essentially a difficulty slider for the enemies and how hard you want the job to be. In the hotfix job, your team's objective in the first 2 zones is to run around and repair the transfer fence. Once you reach the 3rd zone, the task shifts to neutralizing the furnace. To do this, you'll need to fill empty barrels with black rock and send them into the furnace by attaching them to a zipline. Then there's paper chase, a rather ridiculous job where you run through the office cubicles shooting possessed sticky notes scattered across the floor. These notes will begin to cling to your body, and if they completely cover you, you'll die and have to redeploy a new squad member. In other words, respawn. You can get rid of the sticky notes clinging to you by taking a shower, but I'll explain the shower and ammo station mechanics later. At first, paper chase might seem like a creative idea, and in a way it is, but to be transparent with you, shooting sticky notes off walls and floors isn't exactly what I'd call heart-pumping co-op action with friends. It's fun the first or second time, but the novelty wears off fast. Eventually, it just starts to feel like a chore and more like busy work than a good time. That said, the level 3 clearance for paper chase introduces a boss called Sticky Ricky, a giant creature made entirely out of sticky notes. You'll need to dodge his attacks, repair parts of the environment, activate switches to electrify him, and then shoot his weak spot while he's stunned. It's a fun idea, both visually and mechanically, mechanically, but honestly, slogging through 2 boring zones just to get there does not feel worth the effort. The third job is ground control, and it's probably my favorite out of all of them. It's the least boring, in my opinion, because you're constantly engaged. In this job, you have to push a car through each zone and fill it with leech pearls, which you collect by shooting leech eggs stuck to the walls and ceilings. In the final zone, you push the fully loaded cart into a shuttle launcher. Once it's inside, you must defend the area from hiss enemies for a short period of time, and that wraps up the mission. The fourth job is frequency shift, where you and your team must clear out zones filled with pink explosive goo and reactivate the turbines. Occasionally, you'll also need to repair several emitter panels, and in the third zone, you'll have to fix the alpha emitter. Let me tell you, it's easily one of the most boring objectives in the game. You just stand there playing a dull minigame to fix panels, while the goo keeps regenerating around you. It's not exciting at all, especially compared to some of the earlier jobs. It feels like a lazy and uninspired final objective. Last but not least is freezer duty, where you search for heaters, ignite them, and place them near freezing anomalies to clear them out. It's an okay concept, but like most of the other modes, it quickly starts to feel like a chore. The final task in the third zone has you dragging body bags out of bathroom stalls and tossing them into lifts. It's a weird objective, but at least it's something more unique than fixing another emitter like in frequency shift. Now that you understand how jobs work in the game, let's talk about the core mechanics you'll interact with while completing them, either solo or with friends. As you step into the first zone from the elevator, the first things you'll typically find are a shower station and an ammo station. Both need to be repaired, and this can be done by any kit, though the fixer has a unique advantage. The fixer can repair these stations instantly just by hitting them with its wrench. Other kits must press the interact button and complete a minigame that involves alternating between the E and Q keys to fill a circular gauge. If you fail the minigame, you'll start to lose your shield and eventually take damage. It's unclear why the penalty exists, especially since the shield doesn't really feel particularly meaningful in the gameplay in the first place. Showers gradually heal you over time, clear out corruption, and extinguish fire if your character is burning. In essence, water is the primary method of healing in this game. There are no medkits or other traditional health items. Ammo stations function similarly in that they require a minigame to restock your ammo. Initially, I thought this was an interesting mechanic, but it quickly became tedious and just annoying. Every time you run out of ammo, you and your team are forced to backtrack to the nearest station and go through the minigame just to reload. Doing this repeatedly turns what should be a seamless mode into an annoying chore. Whatever happened to regular ammo packs or deployable ammo boxes that certain classes could carry, like in Warhammer 40k Darktide or Deep Rock Galactic? I get that Remedy wanted to try something different here, but in my opinion, their approach to ammo restoration was executed poorly. Just because you're different doesn't mean you're also better or unique or whatever. The one gameplay system and mechanic I do like in FBC Firebreak, however, are the shelters. Throughout each zone, you can find multiple shelters, and all you do is interact with a keypad next to a giant door to open it, with no minigames in sight. Once you enter the shelter, you can find a bunch of ammo to restock with by picking up actual small ammo boxes, and you can also find files that give you requisition points that you can then use to unlock upgrades for your tools, guns, sprays, and cosmetics in the requisition menu. These shelters also have a shower head that can clear you of fire but not heal you, oddly enough. However, if you go next to the sink and interact with the faucet, you will get healed over time by standing next to it. Overall, the shelters are a nice change of pace. You can also use them as a way to funnel in enemies and gun them down as they are charging at you. The sink is also helpful for immediate heals, along with extra ammo boxes if you are in a tight situation. Last but not least, you'll also find random turrets that can be repaired to assist you in fending off the hiss for a limited time, along with electrical panels that must be fixed to restore power and light up certain areas of the zone. Oh, and after you finish your final objective, you have to run all the way back to the first zone, call in the elevator, and fight off a mini-boss along with a wave of hiss before you can leave the job. I personally don't have a major issue with this, but to be honest, Remedy could have done something more exciting or engaging rather than just standing around waiting for an elevator to come in. It feels like a missed opportunity to end each mission on a more memorable note. Now that you understand how FBC Firebreak plays, you're probably wondering, why does it feel so boring? The truth is, it's not a lack of creativity or innovation. The real issue is that the game loses its sense of fun alarmingly fast. The first few jobs may feel fine, but after just a couple of hours, it starts to feel more like a list of household chores than a fun escape after a long day. As I mentioned earlier, shooting dozens of sticky notes across 2 zones in the paper chase job becomes tedious almost immediately, and in frequency shift, constantly clearing explosive goo only for it to regenerate and cover your entire path again quickly grows frustrating. Yes, repetition is part of any game, especially in co-op titles, but here the gameplay loop simply isn't engaging. It lacks the addictive spark that keeps you coming back. Compare this to something like Deep Rock Galactic, one of the best co-op experiences out there, where even repetitive tasks feel rewarding, satisfying, and most importantly, fun. FBC Firebreak sadly is the opposite of that. One last thing I wanted to cover before diving into the visuals and audio of this game are the shooting mechanics. In a nutshell, the shooting in this game just feels lackluster. There's no real weight to the guns or the enemies, and very little feedback when you land hits. It often feels like you are firing bullets made of noodles. That is especially surprising coming from Remedy, a studio known for tight and responsive shooting mechanics in titles like Max Payne and Control. The combat in those games feel great, but for some reason that same magic did not carry over into FBC Firebreak. Enemy design does not help either. You have your standard melee rushers, some basic gun-wielding enemies, and the occasional floating hiss who toss explosive objects at you from above, along with big dudes that carry machine guns and grenade launchers. There are a few other enemies as well, but I won't spoil those. Those types of enemies worked really well in Control, but they just do not feel right here. Maybe it's the shift to first-person view, or maybe it's the overall lack of impact in the gunplay. Whatever the case is, when a swarm of enemies show up, it feels more like a nuisance than a thrilling challenge. That is just another one of the problems. Combat in this game is simply not fun. Alright, it's time to quickly talk about the visuals and audio of the game. FBC Firebreak runs on the Northlight engine, the same engine behind Remedy's recent titles like Alan Wake 2 and Control. For the record, my PC is equipped with an RTX 4090, 64GB of DDR5 RAM, and a Ryzen 9 7950X CPU. I'm not sure if my system is starting to show its age or if the game simply isn't well optimized. Most modern titles default to ultra settings on my rig, but FBC Firebreak automatically set itself to 4K resolution on medium settings with ray tracing turned off. It ran smoothly and looked decent enough. However, I'm used to playing games at 84K with ultra settings and of course with ray tracing. Once I bumped everything up and enabled ray tracing in FBC Firebreak, I began experiencing noticeable FPS drops. Is ray tracing still that demanding, or is this just a case of subpar optimization? For context, I wasn't using any kind of frame generation at first. The RTX 4090 only allows for double frame generation, so I decided to turn it on, and once I did, everything became buttery smooth again. While frame generation is a nice feature to help boost performance, I still feel that for a game with visuals this basic and relatively simple geometry, I shouldn't be experiencing performance loss at all. There are plenty of games with more complex geometry that run better on my system without needing any performance tricks. Maybe it's just how this engine operates, or maybe there are deeper issues. I am not a tech expert, so perhaps that's a question better left to someone like Digital Foundry. Still, I want to be transparent with you and share my personal experience. As for the game's art style, it mostly resembles Control, which is expected since it shares the same universe. That said, I personally think the third-person perspective worked better in that world. I'm not entirely sure that the first-person view was the right move here, but that might be more of a subjective preference than an actual flaw. So in that case, I'll let you decide what works best for you. As for the audio, the game won't really blow you away. The voice acting from your crew is more than serviceable, but nothing memorable. The soundtrack is virtually non-existent, and most of the time you'll just be hearing gunfire, showers turning on, and shelter doors opening. Your main boss also communicates with you over the radio, giving updates on objectives or warning you when the hiss are incoming. But if you compare the sound design and music to other co-op titles like Warhammer 40k Dark Tide or Deep Rock Galactic, FBC Firebreak doesn't even come close. Every time you finish a mission and head to the elevator, the same dull and generic rock music kicks in. There are no unique or varied tracks to set the tone or elevate the action. It's a complete miss in the audio department, utterly forgettable, which is a real shame. In conclusion, FBC Firebreak feels like a big experiment from Remedy to see if they could craft a fresh and exciting cooperative multiplayer experience. Unfortunately, I can say with full confidence that this experiment has failed, which is a shame. I love co-op games and spending my downtime with friends, and I genuinely looked forward to enjoying the game, but after playing it for over 25 or so hours, I just can't. FBC Firebreak will be receiving a final verdict of 6 out of 10. The game feels uninspired, boring, and incredibly tedious to play. At first glance, it might seem like it has solid gameplay ideas, but once you dive in and complete a few jobs, it quickly becomes clear how shallow the experience really is. The lackluster gunplay only makes things worse, especially for a first-person shooter. And to top it all off, this isn't even a free-to-play game. You either have to pay $39.99 or access it through Game Pass or PlayStation Plus. If you suffer from insomnia and your over-the-counter meds no longer do the trick, then sure, feel free to drop the $39.99 on FBC Firebreak, because this game will drain your energy and put you to sleep faster than any pill ever could. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more video game reviews. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful in any way, then make sure to hit like and subscribe with notifications turned on. Peace out and happy gaming.